The easiest way to survive a marriage to Ethan Blackwood was to remember that he never wanted a wife. That was the first thing his lawyer told me before I signed the contract that changed my life. The rain hammered against the courthouse windows hard enough to make the glass tremble, turning Manhattan into a blur of silver lights and shadows. My fingers shook as I held the pen above the paper. 26 years old, 3 overdue medical bills, a mother recovering from heart surgery, and exactly $214 left in my checking account. That was what desperation looked like. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just exhaustion wrapped in borrowed heels and a cream-colored coat that still smelled like the thrift store. "Miss Whitmore," the lawyer asked softly, "Mr. Blackwood doesn't like waiting." Of course he didn't. Men like Ethan Blackwood never waited for anything. I signed my name anyway. Clara Whitmore. The ink barely dried before the office doors opened behind me. The room changed instantly. I felt it before I saw him. Silence spread first, then tension, then the sharp awareness that everyone suddenly stopped breathing normally. Ethan Blackwood walked in wearing a charcoal suit tailored so perfectly it looked painted onto him. 6'3", dark hair brushed neatly back, pale gray eyes cold enough to make winter feel warm. He didn't look at me immediately. Men like him never rushed. His attention moved slowly across the room until it landed on the marriage certificate in front of me. "Done?" he asked. His voice was low, calm, controlled. The kind of voice that made people obey before they realized they were doing it. "Yes, sir," the lawyer answered quickly. Ethan finally looked at me then. Really looked at me. Not like a man looking at a bride. Like a businessman inspecting an agreement he'd already purchased. "Stand up," he said quietly. I hated that my body obeyed before my pride caught up. I rose from the chair, smoothing my coat with nervous fingers. Up close, he smelled like expensive cologne, rain, and something darker underneath. Power, maybe. "You understand the rules?" he asked. "Public appearances when necessary. Respect my privacy. No interviews. No questions about my business." I lifted my chin, even though my pulse stumbled under his stare. "And after 1 year, we divorce." His expression didn't move. "If everything goes smoothly." The lawyer laughed nervously like that sentence was supposed to comfort me. It didn't. Ethan reached into his pocket and removed a diamond ring that probably cost more than my apartment building. He slid it onto my finger with steady hands. No tenderness. No romance. Just precision. "Congratulations," the lawyer said weakly. Ethan never looked away from me. "This marriage means nothing," he said softly enough that only I could hear it. The words should have relieved me. Instead, they settled heavily in my chest. Outside, thunder rolled across the city. A black Escalade waited at the curb downstairs, engine running beneath the storm. 2 men in dark suits stood beside it, watching the street with the alert stillness of trained guards. Ethan opened the car door for me without speaking. Cameras flashed somewhere across the sidewalk the second we stepped outside. Reporters shouted questions through the rain. "Mr. Blackwood, is it true? Who is she? Are you really married?" Ethan's hand settled against the small of my back. Firm. Controlled. Possessive enough to make every camera focus on us. "Smile," he murmured without looking at me. "Why?" I whispered back. His gray eyes flicked toward me for half a second. "Because frightened women attract attention." The car door closed behind us with a heavy thud that shut the world outside away. Silence filled the back seat instantly. Warm leather. Dim lights. Rain streaking across tinted windows. Ethan loosened his cufflinks slowly while the city blurred past us. "You'll move into the Blackwood estate tonight," he said. "A staff member will explain the schedule." Schedule. Like I was an employee, not a wife. I stared down at the diamond on my finger. It glittered under the soft car lights like a warning signal. "Do you always marry strangers this way?" I asked quietly before I could stop myself. One corner of his mouth moved slightly. Not a smile. Something colder. "Only the ones who need saving." I turned toward the window before he could see the reaction on my face. Manhattan lights stretched endlessly through the rain outside, beautiful and distant and impossible to touch. Somewhere deep inside me, instinct whispered the truth I was trying not to hear. I had not just married a powerful man. I had stepped into a world where nothing belonged to me anymore. Not my name, not my freedom, maybe not even my heart. The Blackwood estate sat on the edge of the Hudson like something carved out of another century. Massive iron gates. Stone walls covered in ivy. warm golden lights glowing through towering windows while rain poured endlessly across the driveway. My apartment back in Queens could have fit inside the front entrance alone. The Escalade rolled to a smooth stop beneath the covered entrance, and before I could reach for the handle, one of the men in dark suits opened the door for me. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said respectfully. The title hit me harder than the cold air. Mrs. Blackwood. Not Clara anymore. Ethan stepped out beside me without waiting. He moved through the mansion like the building belonged to his heartbeat. Staff members appeared almost instantly, silent and polished, taking my suitcase before I could protest. A woman in her 50s approached wearing an elegant black dress and a silver necklace shaped like a cross. "Welcome home," she said kindly. "I am Margaret. I oversee the household." Home. The word felt wrong in this place. Ethan loosened his tie while walking toward the grand staircase. "Margaret will show you your room." I frowned slightly. "My room?" He paused halfway up the stairs. "Did you expect us to share one?" Heat crawled into my cheeks immediately. No, his expression stayed unreadable. Good. Then he disappeared upstairs without another glance. Margaret gave me an apologetic smile like she had seen this exact scene before. My room was larger than my entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river. Fresh white roses sat beside the bed. A fireplace glowed softly against marble walls, filling the space with warmth that somehow still felt lonely. "Mr. Blackwood had everything prepared this afternoon," Margaret explained while setting my suitcase near the closet. "Dinner is served at 7 sharp. Breakfast begins at 6. Security will accompany you whenever you leave the estate." I looked up sharply. Security? Standard precaution. For what? Margaret hesitated carefully. "Mr. Blackwood is a very important man." Important. That was one way to describe the man newspapers called untouchable. The man politicians shook hands with while pretending not to notice the whispers surrounding his name. The house grew quieter after Margaret left. Too quiet. I wandered toward the windows, wrapping my arms around myself while rain slid down the glass outside. Somewhere deeper in the mansion, I heard faint piano music drifting through the halls. Slow. Beautiful. Sad enough to make my chest ache. I followed the sound before I could stop myself. The mansion seemed endless at night. Dark wood hallways. Soft golden lighting. Expensive paintings staring down from the walls like silent witnesses. The piano music grew louder as I reached a pair of partially open doors. Ethan sat alone inside a massive study, one hand resting against the piano keys. He was not playing anymore. Just sitting there in silence, staring toward the fireplace with his suit jacket discarded over a nearby chair. For the first time since meeting him, he looked tired. Human, almost. His voice broke the silence before I could step away. "You should not walk around alone." I froze near the doorway. I was looking for the kitchen. "The kitchen is downstairs. Your house is the size of a hotel." A quiet breath almost sounded like amusement. Almost. Ethan rose slowly from the piano bench. Even relaxed, he carried authority like it was stitched into his skin. "You will learn it. Do all your wives get an orientation manual?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. His eyes lifted fully to mine then, cold gray sharpening slightly beneath the dim lights. "You are my first wife, Clara." Something about hearing my name in his voice made my stomach tighten unexpectedly. I folded my arms tighter. That does not make this less strange. Ethan studied me for a long moment. Not angry, not offended, observing. "You are afraid," he said quietly. "You are not." His gaze drifted briefly toward the rain outside the tall windows. "Fear keeps people alive." The room fell silent again except for the crackling fireplace. Up close, I noticed faint shadows beneath his eyes like sleep rarely visited him either. "Why me?" I asked softly before I lost my nerve. "Out of every woman in New York, why did you choose me?" Ethan stepped closer slowly enough to let me move away if I wanted. I did not. "Because," he said calmly, "you needed protection." "From what?" His jaw tightened almost invisibly. "From the kind of people who notice vulnerable women." A chill slid through me despite the warmth of the fire. Before I could ask another question, a phone vibrated sharply somewhere inside his pocket. Ethan glanced at the screen. The softness disappeared instantly. Every trace of warmth sealed away behind cold control. "Go to sleep, Clara." Ethan, now. Not loud. Not cruel. Somehow worse because he never needed volume to be obeyed. I turned toward the hallway slowly, But just before I reached the door, his voice stopped me again. One more thing. I looked back. His gray eyes held mine steadily across the firelit room. No matter what you hear about me, he said quietly, do not believe everything people say. Then he looked away first. And somehow, that unsettled me more than anything else had tonight. The first week of my marriage felt less like a honeymoon and more like learning the rules of an invisible prison. Every morning, breakfast appeared exactly at 7. Every evening, security cars followed me through Manhattan no matter where I went. And every night, Ethan Blackwood returned home long after midnight smelling like rain, expensive whiskey, and secrets nobody dared to ask about. By Friday, I was already starting to hate how quickly my life had changed. You are adjusting well, Margaret said one afternoon while arranging flowers in the dining room. Sunlight spilled through the massive windows, turning the crystal chandeliers into rivers of gold across the marble floor. I feel like I am living inside a museum, I admitted quietly. Margaret smiled faintly. Most people would envy you. Most people do not know me. Her hands paused briefly over the white roses. That may be true, Mrs. Blackwood, but they know him. Him. Always him. The entire city seemed to orbit Ethan Blackwood without ever fully touching him. His name appeared everywhere. Newspapers, charity galas, real estate headlines, political fundraisers. Yet nobody ever explained what he actually did. Only whispers. Always whispers. That evening, I finally saw his world up close. You will accompany me tonight, Ethan said during dinner without looking up from his phone. Candlelight flickered across the sharp lines of his face while rain tapped softly against the windows again. New York seemed trapped in endless storms lately. I set down my fork carefully. Accompany you where? A charity event. And if I say no? His gray eyes lifted slowly to mine. Calm. Cold. Impossible to read. You will still be dressed and downstairs by 8. The frustrating part was knowing he was right. By 7:45, I stood in front of the mirror upstairs wearing a black silk gown Margaret had selected for me earlier. The dress was elegant without trying too hard. Simple diamonds rested against my throat. My hair fell in soft waves over bare shoulders that suddenly felt too exposed. I barely recognized myself. A knock sounded against the bedroom door. Come in, I called softly. Ethan stepped inside wearing a perfectly tailored black tuxedo that made the entire room feel smaller somehow. He stopped walking the moment he saw me. Silence stretched between us for one long heartbeat. Then another. His expression never changed, but something sharpened quietly behind his eyes. The car is waiting, he said finally. That was all. No compliment. No reaction. Still, my pulse betrayed me anyway. The gala occupied the top floor of a Manhattan hotel overlooking Central Park. Cameras flashed endlessly the second Ethan and I stepped onto the red carpet together. People moved aside automatically when he walked past them. Men nodded respectfully. Women watched him carefully over champagne glasses. Nobody ignored Ethan Blackwood. His hand rested lightly against my waist as photographers shouted for another picture. Controlled. Possessive enough to look convincing. Relax your shoulders, he murmured near my ear. You look like you are attending your execution. Maybe I am. One corner of his mouth almost moved. If I planned to destroy you, Clara, you would already know. Somehow that was not comforting. Inside the ballroom, crystal chandeliers glowed above hundreds of wealthy guests dressed in diamonds and designer suits. Music drifted softly through the crowded room, while servers carried silver trays filled with champagne. Ethan guided me through conversations like a man navigating familiar territory. Politicians, investors, famous last names I recognized from magazines. Everyone smiled too carefully around him. Mr. Blackwood. A tall blonde woman approached us near the bar wearing a red gown that probably cost more than my college tuition. Her lipstick curved into a practiced smile the second she saw Ethan. You disappeared after Monaco. Ethan's expression stayed neutral. Vanessa. Her eyes finally shifted toward me. Perfectly manicured surprise flickered across her face when she noticed the diamond ring on my hand. So the rumors are true. My wife, Ethan said calmly. Wife. The word still sounded unnatural in his voice. Vanessa extended her hand toward me politely enough, but something colder lingered underneath the gesture. You are lucky, she said smoothly. Ethan does not keep people close unless they matter. Ethan reached for his whiskey glass before I could answer. Crystal cracked softly beneath the pressure of his fingers. Tiny. Controlled. Dangerous. Vanessa noticed it too. Her smile faded slightly. Excuse me, she said after a moment before slipping back into the crowd. I looked down at Ethan's hand. You almost broke the glass. Did I? His voice remained perfectly calm, but the tension in his jaw told another story. Before I could respond, another voice suddenly cut through the ballroom behind me. Clara Whitmore. My breath caught instantly. I turned around and nearly forgot how to breathe. Ryan Hayes stood only a few feet away wearing a navy suit and the exact same warm smile I remembered from college. Familiar blue eyes widened with shock before dropping slowly to the ring on my finger. Wow, he said softly. I guess life really surprised both of us. Beside me, Ethan went completely still. For one terrible second, the ballroom disappeared. No chandeliers. No music. No whispered conversations floating through crystal glasses and expensive perfume. There was only Ryan standing in front of me looking exactly the way memories were never supposed to look after 5 years apart. Familiar. Safe. Human. Ryan, I breathed softly. His smile widened with genuine surprise. I knew it was you the second I saw your eyes. Beside me, Ethan remained silent. Too silent. Ryan finally noticed him fully and straightened slightly. Sorry, he said quickly. I did not mean to interrupt. You did not, Ethan replied calmly. His voice was smooth enough to fool anyone who did not know how carefully controlled it sounded. Ryan extended his hand politely. Ryan Hayes. Ethan glanced at the offered hand for half a heartbeat before shaking it once. Brief. Firm. Cold. Ethan Blackwood. Ryan laughed lightly. Yeah, I figured that part out from the newspapers. The tension around us tightened almost invisibly. I could feel it anyway. Ethan's hand settled against the small of my back again. Not rough. Not forceful. Somehow worse because of how deliberate it felt. You know my wife from college? Ethan asked. Wife. There it was again. Ryan nodded. Clara and I had architecture classes together at Columbia. His eyes softened when he looked at me. You disappeared before graduation. I always wondered what happened to you. I opened my mouth, but Ethan answered first. Life changed. Ryan's gaze flicked briefly toward Ethan's hand resting against my waist. Clearly, a server passed carrying champagne. Ethan reached for a glass without breaking eye contact with Ryan. The ice inside the crystal shifted softly beneath his fingers. And what do you do now, Mr. Hayes? Ethan asked. Ryan smiled politely. I own a small design firm in Brooklyn. Impressive. The words sounded neutral. Somehow it still felt dangerous. Ryan looked back at me again. You still sketch buildings on napkins when you are nervous? Heat crept into my cheeks instantly. You remember that? You once filled an entire diner table with sketches because your professor criticized your work. His grin widened slightly. You were terrifying. For the first time all evening, I laughed. A real laugh. Soft and unexpected and honest enough to surprise even me. Ryan smiled like hearing it mattered. Beside me, Ethan went completely still again. The shift was subtle, tiny, but I noticed because the air itself seemed to sharpen around him. Excuse us, Ethan said suddenly. Calm. Controlled. Absolute. His hand guided me away before I could protest. We crossed the ballroom beneath glittering chandeliers, while dozens of conversations blurred into meaningless noise around us. Ethan did not stop walking until we reached a private terrace overlooking the city. Cold night air rushed against my skin immediately. Rain had stopped, but the streets below still shimmered silver beneath Manhattan lights. Ethan released my waist slowly. You seem comfortable with him. I frowned slightly. Ryan is an old friend. Friends do not usually look at married women like that. The accusation caught me off guard. Look at me like what? Ethan slipped one hand into his pocket while staring out across the skyline. Like they remember who you were before. Silence settled heavily between us. I folded my arms against the cold wind. You said this marriage means nothing. His jaw tightened almost invisibly. That does not mean appearances stop matching. I stared at him in disbelief. So this is about your image? Ethan looked at me then. Fully. Those pale gray eyes unreadable beneath the terrace lights. Everything around me becomes complicated, Clara. Including you. I am not one of your business deals. No, he said quietly. You are becoming something far more inconvenient. My heartbeat stumbled unexpectedly. Before I could answer, the terrace doors opened behind us. Ryan stepped outside holding my black coat in his hands. I figured you might freeze out here, he said gently. Ethan's expression changed so slightly most people would never notice. But I did. His shoulders stiffened. His gaze dropped briefly to the coat in Ryan's hands. Then to Ryan himself. The city lights reflected coldly inside Ethan's eyes. Ryan offered me the coat carefully. You always hated the cold. I reached for it automatically. Thank you. The moment the fabric settled over my shoulders, Ethan looked away toward the skyline again. One sharp breath left him slowly. Controlled. Tight. Dangerous in a way I could not explain. Ryan glanced between us uncertainly. I should head back inside. Good idea, Ethan said before I could speak. Ryan nodded once toward me. It was really good seeing you again, Clara. Then he disappeared through the terrace doors. Silence returned instantly. Heavy this time. Ethan remained facing the city with both hands in his pockets. The wind shifted through his dark hair, while traffic lights flickered endlessly below us. You should not encourage him, he said at last. My brows pulled together. Encourage what? Hope. I stared at him for several long seconds. You do not get to sound jealous right now. Ethan finally turned toward me again. Calm face. Cold eyes. Wedding ring glinting beneath the terrace lights like a warning. Jealous men lose control, he said softly. And I never lose control. But the way his voice darkened around the words made my pulse whisper otherwise. The drive home from the gala was painfully quiet. Rain tapped softly against the Escalade windows while Manhattan lights streaked across the glass like blurred memories. Ethan sat beside me with one hand resting against the leather seat, his wedding ring catching flashes of passing streetlights every few seconds. He had not spoken since we left the hotel. Somehow, that silence felt louder than anger. I stared down at my hands folded tightly in my lap. You are being dramatic, I finally muttered under my breath. Ethan's eyes stayed fixed on the city outside. Am I? Ryan brought me a coat, not a marriage proposal. You smiled differently around him. My breath caught slightly. What does that even mean? Ethan turned his head slowly then. Calm gray eyes settled on me with unnerving focus. It means I have never seen you smile at me that way. The honesty in his voice unsettled me more than jealousy would have. I looked away first. The estate was silent by the time we arrived home. Midnight shadows stretched across marble floors while the grandfather clock near the staircase echoed softly through the mansion. Ethan loosened his tie as we entered the foyer, exhaustion finally visible beneath the cold perfection he carried all day. Good night, Clara, he said quietly before starting toward the stairs. That is it? I asked before I could stop myself. He paused. What exactly were you expecting? I hated that I did not have an answer. Ethan studied me for a moment longer before disappearing upstairs without another word. Sleep never came easily after that night. The following morning felt heavy from the second I opened my eyes. Gray clouds hung over the Hudson outside my bedroom windows, while distant thunder rolled somewhere beyond the city. I wandered downstairs around 9, wearing an oversized cream sweater and soft black leggings, hoping coffee might calm the strange tension still sitting inside my chest. Margaret stood near the kitchen island, arranging fresh lilies into a crystal vase. Good morning, she greeted warmly. Mr. Blackwood already left for the city. A ridiculous amount of disappointment hit me before I could hide it. Early meeting? Margaret hesitated slightly. Something like that. I poured coffee slowly while trying not to care. Does he always work this much? Mr. Blackwood does not rest easily. Her answer lingered strangely in my mind long after she left the kitchen. Around noon, I escaped to the estate library hoping distraction would quiet my thoughts. The room smelled like old leather and cedar wood, lined floor to ceiling with books collected from places I would probably never see. Rain drifted softly against the tall windows while jazz music played low through hidden speakers somewhere overhead. For the first time all week, the mansion almost felt peaceful. Then my phone buzzed against the armrest beside me. Ryan Hayes. I stared at the screen longer than necessary before answering. Hello. Please tell me I am not interrupting billionaire wife activities. His familiar laugh slipped warmly through the phone. Against my own judgment, I smiled. You mean surviving awkward charity galas? Exactly that. I leaned deeper into the couch cushions. What are you doing? Working 3 blocks from Central Park while questioning all my life choices. Sounds familiar. Silence softened briefly between us. Comfortable. Easy. Dangerous for reasons I did not want to examine too closely. You disappeared after college, Ryan said gently after a moment. One day you were there. Then suddenly you were gone. My fingers tightened around the coffee mug. Life got complicated. Complicated enough to marry Ethan Blackwood? I exhaled slowly. Ryan, I am not judging you. His voice lowered carefully. I just want to know if you are okay. Nobody had asked me that in weeks. Maybe longer. Before I could answer, movement reflected faintly across the library windows behind me. My pulse stumbled instantly. Ethan stood in the doorway wearing a dark charcoal coat, still damp from rain outside. He had come home silently enough that I never heard him enter the house. His gray eyes rested on me first, then slowly shifted toward the phone in my hand. I should go, I said quickly into the phone. Ryan sounded surprised. Clara, wait, I will call you later. I ended the call before he could respond. The library suddenly felt smaller, warmer, harder to breathe inside. Ethan walked farther into the room with calm, measured steps. Water dripped quietly from the edge of his coat onto polished hardwood floors. You left your meeting early? I asked softly. It was canceled. His gaze flicked briefly toward my phone again. You seemed comfortable talking to him. Irritation sparked instantly beneath my ribs. You really need to stop doing that. Doing what? Acting like you care who I talk to. Ethan removed his gloves slowly, one finger at a time. Deliberate. Controlled. I care about risks. Ryan is not a risk. You are too trusting. And you are too controlling. Silence fell heavily between us. Ethan set his gloves down on the desk beside him without looking away from me once. You think I enjoy control? He asked quietly. I think you do not know how to live without it. Something dark flickered briefly behind his eyes, then disappeared before I could fully understand it. Thunder rumbled softly outside the windows. Ethan stepped closer slowly enough to let me move away if I wanted. Again, I did not. Men like Ryan Hayes, he said calmly, see kindness and mistake it for invitation. I lifted my chin stubbornly. Maybe because kindness should not feel rare. The words landed harder than I intended. Ethan went completely still. For the first time since meeting him, I watched something almost painful move across his face before disappearing behind cold restraint again. He looked away toward the rain outside. You should stay away from him, he said quietly. That sounds jealous. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Then finally, very softly, he answered, that should worry you more than it does. 3 days later, I realized Ethan Blackwood had stopped pretending Ryan Hayes did not exist. It started with little things. Extra security vehicles trailing behind me through Manhattan. Questions that sounded casual, but never were. Where did you go this afternoon? How long were you there? Who else was with you? He never raised his voice. Somehow that made it worse. Rain covered the city again Friday evening when I finally escaped the estate for coffee downtown. I needed air that did not smell like polished marble and control. The cafe sat on a quiet corner near Bryant Park, warm light glowing through fogged windows, while people hurried past outside beneath umbrellas. Ryan was already there when I arrived, standing near the counter with 2 coffees in his hands, and that same easy smile I remembered from college. You still order vanilla lattes, he said as I approached. Some things survive adulthood. I laughed softly while taking the cup from him. You remembered. I remembered a lot of things. The honesty in his voice made my chest tighten unexpectedly. We found a table near the windows while jazz music drifted softly through the cafe speakers. For the first time in weeks, conversation felt natural. No calculating words. No careful silences. Ryan talked about his design firm in Brooklyn, his tiny office with leaking pipes and impossible clients, the employee who accidentally emailed an unfinished blueprint to a millionaire investor. I laughed harder than I had since my wedding day. Maybe longer. There she is, Ryan said quietly after a while. I was wondering if she still existed. My smile faded slightly. Who? The girl who used to sketch rooftops during lectures because she thought buildings looked lonely from above. Warmth spread unexpectedly through my chest. Ethan knew my schedule. Ryan remembered who I used to be. Somehow that difference mattered more than it should have. Outside the cafe windows, rain poured harder across the sidewalks. Traffic lights reflected red and gold against wet pavement, while thunder rumbled softly over Manhattan. Ryan glanced toward the storm. Looks like you are trapped here for a while. I have survived worse. You always say that like it is a challenge. His smile softened slightly. Are you happy, Clara? The question landed too directly. I wrapped both hands around the warm coffee cup while searching for an answer that did not exist. My life changed very fast. Ryan leaned back slowly, studying me carefully. That is not what I asked. Before I could respond, movement outside the cafe caught my attention. A black Escalade sat parked directly across the street beneath the rain. My stomach dropped instantly. Dark tinted windows. Familiar shape. Familiar silence surrounding it. Ryan noticed my expression change. What is wrong? I looked away from the window too quickly. Nothing. But it was not nothing. Because deep down, instinct already recognized what my mind was trying to deny. Ethan knew where I was. 20 minutes later, the rain finally softened enough for us to leave. Ryan insisted on walking me outside despite my protests. Cold wind swept through the streets while water shimmered beneath every streetlight in the city. Ryan removed his coat the second he noticed me shiver. Ryan, take it. You will freeze. I grew up in Boston. This is barely weather. I laughed quietly while he settled the coat over my shoulders. The warmth still carried traces of cedar and coffee. Familiar, comforting, dangerous in ways I did not fully understand yet. Thank you, I whispered. You do not have to thank people for basic kindness, Clara. The words hit harder than he realized. Before either of us moved, the rear passenger door of the Escalade opened across the street. Ethan stepped out slowly into the rain. Dark charcoal overcoat, black gloves, pale gray eyes fixed entirely on us from beneath the storm. My pulse stumbled violently. Ryan straightened immediately beside me. Ethan crossed the street without rushing once. Cars hissed across wet pavement around him while thunder rolled somewhere overhead. The city itself seemed to quiet when he moved. He stopped directly in front of us, gaze landing first on Ryan's coat around my shoulders, then on Ryan standing too close beside me. Silence stretched, sharp enough to cut skin. Mr. Hayes, Ethan said calmly. Ryan nodded once. Mr. Blackwood. Ethan's attention returned to me. You were supposed to be home an hour ago. Heat flashed through my chest instantly. I did not realize I had a curfew. Ethan ignored the comment completely. His eyes stayed locked on Ryan's coat resting over my shoulders. Rain slid slowly down the sharp edge of his jaw while his gloved hand flexed once at his side. Tiny movement. Massive warning. Ryan stepped slightly forward. The weather got bad. We lost track of time. Ethan finally looked at him fully then. Calm face. Freezing eyes. I did not ask you. The temperature between them dropped instantly. Ethan, I said quietly. His gaze snapped back to mine. For one dangerous second, emotion cracked visibly beneath his control. Jealousy. Real jealousy. Dark enough to make my heartbeat stutter. Then it vanished behind cold restraint again. Ethan stepped closer slowly until only inches separated us. His hand lifted toward the collar of Ryan's coat resting over my shoulders. Take this off, he said softly. I stared up at him in disbelief. It is raining. I know. His fingers brushed the fabric once before falling away again. Controlled. Careful. Somehow trembling slightly beneath the gloves. You are wearing another man's coat, he said quietly. And I am trying very hard not to hate that. Rain soaked through my sweater by the time Ethan opened the Escalade door for me. I slid into the back seat without another word, Ryan's coat still wrapped around my shoulders like evidence neither of us wanted to discuss. Across the street, Ryan remained standing beneath the glow of the cafe lights watching the car disappear into Manhattan traffic. Ethan said nothing during the drive home. Not one word. The silence beside him felt sharper than shouting ever could. His jaw remained tense beneath passing streetlights while rain streaked endlessly across the windows between us and the city. I finally pulled Ryan's coat tighter around myself just to break the suffocating quiet. Ethan noticed immediately. Of course he did. His gray eyes shifted toward the movement for half a second before returning to the storm outside. You are angry, I said softly. No, that was definitely anger. That, he replied calmly, was restraint. The answer settled heavily between us. I looked down at my hands. Ryan is my friend. Ethan gave a quiet hum that sounded dangerously close to disbelief. Friends do not look at each other the way he looks at you. Irritation sparked instantly beneath my ribs. And how exactly does he look at me? Ethan finally turned toward me fully. Cold city lights reflected faintly inside his pale eyes. Like he regrets losing you. My breath caught before I could hide it. Ethan saw that too. Of course he did. His gaze darkened almost imperceptibly. The estate was silent when we arrived home. Thunder rolled softly over the Hudson, while staff members disappeared discreetly into other wings of the mansion the second we entered. Ethan removed his gloves slowly beside the staircase, movements controlled enough to feel dangerous. I slipped Ryan's coat from my shoulders and held it awkwardly in both hands. I will return this tomorrow. Ethan's eyes dropped briefly toward the coat. No, I frowned. What? You will not see him tomorrow. Heat flared instantly through my chest. You do not get to decide that. I do when his attention becomes a problem. For who? Ethan stepped closer then. Not aggressively. Deliberately. The air between us tightened immediately. For me. The honesty in his voice stunned me silent for one dangerous heartbeat. Ethan exhaled slowly like the admission itself irritated him. Go upstairs, Clara. No, his gaze sharpened instantly. Excuse me. I folded my arms tighter around Ryan's coat. You told me this marriage means nothing. You told me not to expect feelings. So you do not get to stand here acting possessive because another man was kind to me. Ethan's jaw tightened hard enough for me to see it. Kindness is not always innocent. Neither is control. Silence crashed heavily between us. Rain hammered against the mansion windows while the grandfather clock echoed through the foyer like distant thunder. Ethan stared at me for several long seconds with an expression I could not fully read anymore. Not cold. Not calm. Worse. Cracking. Do you have feelings for him? He asked quietly. The question hit harder than it should have. Why does that matter? Answer me. No, Ethan's shoulders loosened slightly before tightening all over again when I added softly. But at least Ryan never makes me feel owned. The words landed like a knife thrown too accurately. Ethan looked away immediately toward the dark staircase. One sharp breath left him slowly. You think I wanted this? He asked quietly. I frowned slightly. Wanted what? His eyes lifted back to mine. Tiredness finally broke through the perfect control he carried everywhere else. To care. The confession stole every prepared response from my chest. Ethan stepped closer again until only inches separated us. Close enough for me to smell rain and whiskey lingering against his clothes. Close enough to notice the faint exhaustion beneath his eyes. I built my entire life around discipline, he said softly. Control keeps people alive. Control keeps weakness hidden. Then suddenly you walk into my house wearing another man's coat and laughing at someone else's jokes like none of this touches you. His voice lowered further. Rougher now. Real. And I hate how much that bothers me. My pulse stumbled painfully against my ribs. Ethan's gaze dropped briefly toward my lips before returning instantly to my eyes again. Controlled. Always controlled. This was supposed to be simple, he murmured. A contract. 1 year. No emotions. Then stop acting like my husband. The second that words left my mouth, something shifted visibly inside him. Ethan reached forward suddenly, fingers wrapping gently but firmly around my wrist. Not painful. Impossible to ignore. His wedding ring pressed cool against my skin. That is the problem, Clara, he said quietly. I do not know how to do that anymore. My heartbeat became deafening. The mansion around us disappeared into silence while rain battered the windows like distant applause. Ethan's thumb brushed once against the inside of my wrist, feeling the frantic pulse there. His expression darkened slightly when he found it racing. You feel it too, he whispered. Do not. I can hear your heartbeat from here. Ethan, tell me to let go. His voice sounded almost dangerous now. Not because of anger. Because he genuinely might listen. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. Ethan stared at me for one endless second before releasing my wrist abruptly, like touching me too long had become a mistake. He stepped backward immediately, dragging one hand through rain-damp hair while tension rolled visibly through his shoulders. Go upstairs, he said again, rougher this time. I should have moved. Instead, I stood frozen beneath the chandelier lights watching the most controlled man I had ever met lose a war inside himself one breath at a time. I did not go upstairs. Maybe I should have. Maybe a smarter woman would have taken the silence Ethan offered and hidden behind a locked bedroom door until morning. But I was tired of doors. Tired of rules. Tired of being protected in ways that felt too much like being kept. So I stood beneath the chandelier with Ryan's coat still folded over my arm and looked at the man everyone feared while he looked anywhere except at me. Say it again, I whispered. Ethan's gaze returned slowly. Say what? That you care. His face closed instantly. There it was. The wall. The cold marble mask. The version of him New York knew. Go to sleep, Clara. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. Of course. I placed Ryan's coat on the table beside us with more force than necessary. You can admit jealousy. You can order me around. You can decide who is safe and who is not. But the second I ask for one honest sentence, you disappear. Ethan's eyes sharpened. You want honesty? I want dignity. The word changed something in the room. Even the rain seemed quieter after it. I slipped the diamond ring from my finger. It took effort. My hands were shaking too hard. The ring came free with a soft drag against my skin, leaving behind a pale circle that looked too much like proof. I set it on the polished table between us. Ethan stared at it, as if I had placed a loaded truth there instead. I was never yours, I said, my voice trembling but clear. You only rented my name. His face went still. Not angry. Not cold. Wounded in a way so quiet it almost looked like nothing. I hated that seeing it hurt me too. This contract saved my mother, I continued. It paid her bills. It gave me walls and security and a last name powerful enough to scare people away. But it did not give you me. Not my choices. Not my friendships. Not my heart. Ethan did not move. His gray eyes lifted from the ring to my face slowly. And for once, there was no command waiting behind them. Only a man who had finally reached the edge of control and found nothing there to hold on to. Do you want him? He asked quietly. My chest tightened. This is not about Ryan. It became about him the moment you smiled at him, like breathing was easy. No, I said softly. It became about him because he reminded me what easy felt like. Ethan flinched. Barely. Enough. Thunder rolled over the river, low and distant, while the mansion held its breath around us. I reached down and picked up my purse from the chair near the foyer. His eyes followed the movement instantly. Where are you going? To my old apartment. It is not safe. Maybe not. I swallowed hard. But at least it is mine. For a second, I thought he would stop me. Every part of him looked built for stopping people. The height, the authority, the silence that made grown men lower their eyes. But Ethan Blackwood only stood there with his hands at his sides while I walked toward the door. Margaret appeared at the end of the hallway, pale and worried, but she said nothing. Nobody did. That was the strangest part. In a house full of people trained to obey Ethan's smallest gesture, no one moved because he did not give the order. The front doors opened to cold night air and the smell of rain. I stepped outside without a coat. The driveway stones were slick beneath my heels. My pulse pounded so loudly I almost missed the sound behind me. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Ethan followed me into the rain, but he did not touch me, did not block my path, did not call for the car. He stopped several feet away, water darkening his white shirt beneath the open collar of his suit. Clara. My name sounded different in the storm. Less like possession, more like prayer. I turned around with my arms wrapped around myself against the cold. What? He looked at me through the rain, and for the first time since our wedding day, the most powerful man I knew looked powerless. I do not know how to ask someone to stay, he said quietly. The words hit harder than any command ever could. Then learn, I whispered. His throat moved once. His voice came lower, rougher, stripped of every weapon he usually carried. Stay because you want to. Not because of the contract. Not because of my name. Not because I can protect you. Rain slid down his face, but his eyes never left mine. Stay because I am asking as a man who is terrified of what this house becomes without you in it. My breath shook. Behind him, the mansion glowed golden and enormous against the storm. In front of me stood Ethan Blackwood. No guards, no orders, no mask strong enough to hide the fear in his eyes. And for the first time, leaving felt less like freedom than a question I was not ready to answer. I stood in the rain staring at Ethan Blackwood while thunder rolled above the Hudson, and something inside me cracked quietly open. Maybe it was the honesty in his voice. Maybe it was the fact that for the first time since I met him, he was not trying to control the moment. He was just standing there letting me see the damage underneath the suit. You are afraid, I whispered softly. Ethan gave a humorless smile that disappeared almost immediately. Terrified. Rain soaked through his dark hair and white shirt while cold. Wind swept across the driveway between us. The powerful man who could silence rooms with a glance suddenly looked exhausted in a way money could never fix. I tightened my arms around myself against the storm. You said emotions were weakness. For men like me, they usually are. Then why did you marry me? Ethan looked toward the mansion behind him briefly before answering. Because your mother needed surgery, and I needed a wife no one in my world could manipulate. The honesty hurt more than lies would have. So I was convenient. At first, his gray eyes returned to mine steadily. Then you started laughing in my house, arguing with me, walking through rooms like you were not afraid of me, even when you should have been. His voice lowered slightly, and suddenly the quiet did not feel empty anymore. My heartbeat stumbled painfully. Rain slid down my face, cold enough to keep me from thinking clearly. You make everything complicated, I whispered. Ethan stepped one pace closer. Careful, like approaching something fragile. I know. You watch me like I belong to you. I am trying not to. That is not better. Pain flickered briefly across his face again. Real this time. Clara, I do not know how to love someone without wanting to protect them. Silence stretched between us while water shimmered across the stone driveway and lightning flashed somewhere far over Manhattan. I realized then that Ethan's control had never come from arrogance. It came from fear. Fear of loss. Fear of weakness. Fear that if he loved something deeply enough, the world would eventually use it against him. Against us. My chest tightened unexpectedly at the thought. Ryan was right about one thing, I said quietly. Ethan's jaw tightened almost instantly at the name. I do not enjoy hearing about him right now. Despite everything, a small laugh escaped me. Tired. Soft. Human. Ethan's expression changed the second he heard it. Like relief moved through him before he could stop it. He said I disappeared. I continued. And maybe I did. Somewhere between hospital bills and contracts and trying to survive. I looked up at him fully. But I do not want to disappear anymore. Ethan stared at me in silence while rain dripped from his lashes. What are you saying? I stepped closer to then. Close enough to see the uncertainty he hid from everyone else in the world. I am saying I will not stay because you can protect me. His breathing slowed carefully. Good. And I will not stay because of a contract. Clara, I am staying, I whispered, because somewhere between fighting with you and trying not to fall apart around you, my voice trembled slightly. You became home too. Ethan closed his eyes for one brief second like the words physically hit him. When he opened them again, every wall inside them looked shattered. His hand lifted slowly toward my face, careful enough to give me time to move away. I did not. His fingers brushed rainwater gently from my cheek, warm despite the storm around us. You are going to ruin me, he said softly. Probably. A real smile touched his mouth then. Small. Rare. Beautiful enough to steal the breath from my lungs, because it belonged only to me. The front doors behind us opened quietly. Margaret stood there pretending not to watch, while holding two umbrellas she clearly forgot to bring outside. I laughed under my breath. Ethan glanced back once before returning his attention to me again. Come inside, he murmured. You are freezing. That sounds dangerously like concern. Do not get used to it. But his hand settled against my lower back anyway while guiding me toward the house. Warm. Protective. No longer pretending it meant nothing. The mansion looked different when we stepped back inside together. Softer somehow. Less like a prison. More like a place waiting to be lived in. Ethan removed his soaked suit jacket near the staircase while I slipped off my heels against the marble floor. Neither of us spoke for a moment. We did not need to. Some silences no longer hurt. Ethan looked at the diamond ring still resting on the foyer table where I left it earlier. Then at me. You should keep it, he said quietly. Why? His gray eyes held mine steadily. Because this stopped being a business arrangement the moment losing you became the only thing that scared me. My chest tightened painfully again. I walked back toward the table slowly and picked up the ring. Water still glimmered across the diamond beneath the chandelier lights. Ethan watched me carefully.